Whether your project is tiny or colossal, it is a jungle out there. So today we're going to be spilling the tea on project manager deliverables for every stage of the project so you're successful. What are project manager deliverables? Let's get this clear. It is not the overall deliverable that you are giving at the end of the project, which is what your project is doing and the thing that you're going to be handing off saying, hey, we're done. These are your project manager deliverables within the stages of your project. Things as a project manager or as a lead that you have to give to your stakeholders. And that could be your sponsor, that could be your steering committee, your team members. These are the things as a project manager you have to ensure that they have to be successful so that your overall deliverable is successful. This is one of the reasons why I created my Slay project management program, because I found project managers did not understand these deliverables. And that's why I laid it out, because that's what distinguishes success. And that's what distinguishes really doing your projects well and making it easy. Initiation stage is all about defining and authorizing the project. This is really where you're getting the ball rolling. You're probably going to get your marching orders from your project sponsor or some sort of senior executive saying, we want you to do A, B, C, D. Now, as a project manager, your deliverable here is not just to walk away and then start executing, is to really pull out two key deliverable documents that you need to focus your attention on. One is a project scope statement and the other is a priority matrix. Now, a project scope statement in the ideal world, that senior person would have handed it to you. Here's what we want you to do. Doesn't happen. I've never had that happen in the 20 plus years that I've done projects. So if it has happened to you, yay, but normally it doesn't. So you have to be proactive. So you get that scope statement. That's a really important deliverable that you need to get in this stage. The second thing you want to do is a priority matrix. Now this is where you have an understanding of your scope, time, and budget, and what is you need to optimize, what's a constraint, what do you have flexibility with. Why? Because this is what's going to ensure that you keep your project on track and it doesn't start moving where you have to start implementing some other things like change control to keep things on track. And not only that, it's a tool and technique to make sure that you can get approval in advance of, so you can nip things in the bud. Now, your stakeholders at this point in time for these deliverables are going to be senior executives, sponsors, steering committees. So these are the individuals you want to be getting approvals from and ensuring that these documents are done within this stage. Planning. In planning stage, this is where you're refining your scope, getting really clear on your objectives, and building your baseline project plan. This is really critical. You're still in preparation mode, by the way. You haven't executed anything yet because it's called planning. So what are some of those project manager deliverables that you really have to think about? Well, this is where the charter comes into play. I use a charter slightly different in the sense of I use it as the core document that has everything in it. So it's built off that scope statement from the initiation stage, but it has a little more information in it. So it'll have all the milestones, potentially some risks and assumptions, people who you need on the project, what are the roles and responsibility, budget would be in there. So again, it's the whole refining of the scope, time, and budget to make sure that you're really successful. And I use this to ensure that individuals understand what it is that they have to do. Another project manager deliverable is the WBS framework. So a WBS is not what you think it is, and just think about work BS, but it's not that. It's work breakdown structure. So why is that really important? Because at this stage, you have your charter, you have all the detail, and this is where you take a look and you break things down into manageable chunks. This becomes really important because this is going to allow for you to understand what are potentially all the moving puzzle pieces, and do you have all the right individuals, and is your timing going to shift or change because of that? And then the last project manager deliverable you have to consider is by bringing this all together by having your kickoff meeting with your project team. You want to do this at the end. You have these deliverables. And so at this stage with these deliverables, you want to make sure that you still have your senior management because they have to approve on everything you created, but you start to bring in your project team at this point so they can really get everything that they need to start running with the project. Okay, we just talked about initiation and planning, and I want to let you know at this particular point that I actually have a free webinar that talks all about the 5 key elements to start a project off successfully. So not only this video with these project manager deliverables do you need to know, but I highly recommend that you sign up for this free webinar. How do you do it? Well, there's a link underneath this video. Execution. Execution stage is all about carrying out the project plan. This is what we know as project managers. Oh my goodness, let's start executing on what it is that we're supposed to be doing. But you can see the preparation that you have to do and some of those deliverables, again, key deliverables that you should have on every single project. Now, what are some of the project manager deliverables you need to have in this stage? Well, action plan and timeline. All right, you build this off of your charter information, by the way, and you want to make sure it's very clear along with the WBS, because you can break that WBS from your planning stage in more detail and actually create an action plan out of it. So that becomes really important as a deliverable, because then what your team will do is they'll vet it out for you as subject matter experts and make sure that everything is in there that's supposed to be in there. The other thing that you also want to consider having is a really solid meeting management principles, techniques, and templates. So in my Slay project management program, I encompass all of this because you can see all the deliverables that we have to do. And you need to make sure that you're really good at meeting management. Why? How many meetings are you with projects? Tons. So it becomes really important that you're really good at this because you don't want to be wasting your team's time. You want them to be effective and you want them to be efficient, but you still need meetings. So that becomes really important. And then the last deliverable you have to consider is your change management plan. You probably maybe have seen a video I did on trends. Change management is a big trend coming into play. You have to start bringing that into your projects. And so having a solid understanding of some fundamentals of change management is going to be critical. Really important to have those deliverables. Monitoring and control. This stage of the project is all about monitoring your progress and course correcting as needed. This becomes really critical because monitoring and control, it's not a linear approach, because when you monitor, control, and course correct, you actually go back to the planning stage. The planning stage goes to the execution, you go back to monitor and control, and you do this iteration. And that's why those project manager deliverable documents we were talking about become important, because you're going to be updating them all the time. So what are some of the documents that you need to take a look at? Well, obviously through course correcting, you're going to be doing some of those documents in the previous stages, but there's some new documents that you should be looking at as well. One of them is a risk analysis. You want to do a detailed risk at this point in time. In fact, in some of the other documents of the earlier stages, you will highlight some risks, but now that you're looking at everything, it's a good opportunity to do a really good deep dive risk analysis. I promise you risk happens, and you want to at least have some sort of mitigation and contingency plan around things that you're identifying as a high risk to your project. Another thing in this stage, which is really important, is change control. So change control is when, how are you going to deal with something that's changing the project, whether it's scope, time, or budget, and it's going to impact your project plan, your timeline, and it's really important that you have a process associated with that. So this is where you would bring in that process in those documents at this stage. And it becomes important that you look at it from that perspective, because this is the deliverable that you have to do, is you have to make sure you're monitoring everything and course correcting, because ultimately with everything that everyone is doing and that iteration that's happening, you're getting closer and closer to the end game goal, which is the overall deliverable of the project. Closeout. Closeout stage is your last stage, but it's not a simple thing of just closing out. This is where you're ensuring that you're getting final approvals and you're handing it off to whomever is supposed to be getting this particular deliverable that your project spent all this time creating. So there are two key things that you want to look at. One is an after action review, a post-mortem. So this is a document and a process where you go through everything so that you can learn your lessons for the next project. Take note, you're not just going to do this post-mortem, this after action review just at this point of time. You can integrate it throughout your life cycle of the project, which I highly recommend. But from a deliverable perspective, you absolutely must have one at the end of your project, because you want to make sure that you document what went well, what needs improvement. So when a project comes up next time, which is similar in scope, in nature, budget and even time, or even with people, you have something to work off of to make it even better. The second thing you want to look at is you want to get transfer requirement approval. What? This is where you're finalizing your requirements, not from a standpoint of what it is that you're delivering, because that's already been done in the earlier project manager deliverable documents that you were working on throughout those stages. This is now the handoff. So if you're working on something that's internal in your organization, it's going to a different department, you have to make sure and put a plan together of how are you going to hand it off? How are you going to support it? How are you going to take your team and bring it down to a few, like we call it the skeleton crew, to make sure that that department is being supported with this new deliverable that they now have. So that becomes really important to finalize those requirements. And those are again, these are your key things that you need to have at each stage. Okay. Do not forget, I got that free webinar for you on how to start your project off correctly. And I highly recommend you need to do it, watch it, see it. And how can you do that? There's a link underneath this video. Okay, now that you have these deliverables, make sure you watch this next video. And if you could like this video, leave us a comment, let us know. Are there some deliverables that you would maybe add to this, or have you used any of them? And until next time, I'll see you later.